My memories of my 4 years at Kharagpur are still quite vivid, and I always remember them as the happiest years of my life. It was while at IIT that you learn not just engineering, but basic life skills, how to interact with people, how to stand on your own 2 feet, and how to solve problems. And this is what the IIT experience is all about. It's not just learning engineering. I was not academically brilliant. I spent most of my time doing these other things like these inter-hall competitions in debating and quizzes, and the Anglo-Indian girls were chasing me like mad because I was the hero. So I spent all my days cycling and dancing and doing quizzes, and did just a bit of studies to pass the exam. But it formed my character no end. So this is what IIT was all about. I left India in a very sad situation because in 1962-3 there was the India-China border war, and as a result of that, people of Chinese ethnicity were treated very badly, as some of you may know. After I graduated in '62 and went to apply for jobs, many of these firms, even the British firms, didn't want to employ someone with a Chinese face for obvious reasons. So it was for that reason that I left India and decided to go abroad. When I went to Hong Kong for a couple of months, because that is where my mother came from, I found it very hard to get on in Hong Kong because I didn't speak Chinese fluently. I knew Hindi better than I knew Chinese. And of course, being uncomfortable there, I decided to go on to the UK. So I have always regarded myself as an Indian, and of course an Indian at heart, and I have an Indian heart but a Chinese face. I thought when I arrived at the UK things would be different, but I soon discovered, to my utter horror and shock, that the IIT degree, which you thought was the bee's knees, was not worth anything. I went to the Institution of Electrical Engineers in 1963 and asked them, can I be enrolled as an engineer? They said no, that we don't recognize your degree. And in fact, I discovered that the IIT degree in those days was only regarded as a matriculation, like an A level. And to put it bluntly, they thought it was like Calcutta University failed. So that was a rude awakening. So I had to start from the very bottom. They said I had to do all my exams again, which I was not prepared to do. So I went and applied to the electricity supply industry for a job, and I had to start from the lowest level. But I soon proved that I was able to do the job. And the person who gave me my first job, I met him only a few years ago, and he said I could see that you could do the job, so I wasn't worried about your degree. So the IIT degree didn't carry any weight at all. You had to prove yourself. But of course what IIT teaches you is that you have to stand on your own feet and try and excel in whatever you do. So I got away with it. I think in IIT everyone is competitive because they competed to get into IIT and they compete to do well. So being competitive is important. So you always remain competitive throughout your life. When I joined the civil service, I was of course sent to the energy department because I had a background in electricity. And in the energy department, I was looking after North Sea oil, nuclear, coal, gas. I did the lot, and I ended up doing the energy policy posting as an energy policy advisor. And in 1979, when Mrs. Thatcher came into power, she decided to sell off all the nationalized energy industries, which was electricity, gas, coal, nuclear, you name it. She wanted to privatize everything. And because I was writing speeches on energy policies, I ended up writing quite a few of her privatization speeches for selling off all these nationalized energy industries. And of course she advocated that people should stand on their own 2 feet and not rely on the state. And it was all about enterprise culture. And while writing speeches about enterprise culture, some of the government ministers that I worked with said to me, "Why are you pushing paper around the department when you could be starting your own business?" because one or two of them knew that I was very good at bonsai. Bonsai was a hobby and I had already excelled in bonsai in that field. So I thought to myself, why not give it a go? You know, I can turn my hobby into a business. And that's how I got the idea of starting my own business. And that was back in 1985. I was never sad to leave the service, a civil service, because I was not very happy there for a number of reasons. First of all, the civil service, like any civil service organization, it is very bureaucratic. The Babu culture. The Babus always believe in stopping things. They like to be bossy and control things. They are not facilitators, and that was very frustrating for me. I found that I was a facilitator. The IIT culture teaches you to be a facilitator and not to be a Babu who likes to control and inhibit things. So that is one reason I was not happy there. The other reason was really there was incipient discrimination, racial discrimination in the civil service in the 70s and even in the early 80s. I remember that even though I was writing speeches for the ministers and even the Prime Minister, I found that my colleagues in the civil service, as soon as you told them that you were not from Oxford or Cambridge but from an Indian university, they treated you like a leper. They didn't want to know you. You were an outcast. And that I found very sad in a way. Of course, nowadays, diversity and discrimination is on the agenda all over the world, especially in the United States and in the UK, where in fact if you are of a different ethnic background, you get ahead better than if you were a local, white person. But in those days it was completely the opposite. You suffered a lot of discrimination. So I didn't like this discrimination, and I didn't like the bureaucracy, which was very inhibiting. So for those reasons I felt that in order to fulfill my life and to fulfill my IIT potential, it was best to leave and start my own business. It's ironical that when I was in Kharagpur, I was the gardening secretary of my hall of residence, and I perfected my gardening there, and of course I am now a gardener here. I'm just a sophisticated Mali. That is what my profession is. I'm not a technologist, but I'm a problem solver and technologist in other ways, because when you run your business, you're trying to solve problems, the problems of the business, the problems of the trees. In fact, what I do combines artistic skills as a bonsai artist or bonsai maker, and also a business facilitator or business entrepreneur. So I combined two things which I found very satisfying. So my business started purely as a hobby. Bonsai was a hobby which I excelled at, and I decided to turn the hobby into a business. It was difficult at first because in 1985, when I decided to buy the nursery that we own today, there were already many other big players in the field, and my friends told me, "You've left it too late, they will just crush you." But I set about it in a methodical, analytical way, and I decided to carve out a niche market, and from that niche market, and in 5 years I more or less eliminated all the other competitions. So today we are the biggest bonsai nursery in the UK. Entrepreneurship is another form of challenge. There are two aspects of this. You've got to grab the opportunity when it presents itself, and you've got to take a quick decision. You mustn't dilly-dally. There's a risk involved, so it's a calculated risk, but there is also an element of taking the decision at the right time. I'm a great believer in giving back to society. Giving back to society involves giving back your time, expertise, and money. And unless you do that, I think you lose something in life. It is important to help those who are less fortunate than ourselves, and just generally to help the next generation on. It is very similar to, in my field of work, horticulture and gardening, where we have to put something back into the soil. Unless you put manure back into the soil, you do not get good crops. So if you do not plow back into society, the next generation will be the poorer for it. So giving back to society is in a way like farming, where you give back so that you get better yields and return. It doesn't involve a lot of money. Sometimes you can be not very well off. You don't have to be a rich person to give back to society, but it is a mindset. You've got to learn to give back whatever your state.